Have you ever noticed how the loudest messages are often delivered in the most absolute, suffocating silence? It is the sensation of a cold front moving into a room, where the air thickens with a hostility that has no name. We are beginning an exploration into the quietest of human battlefields, where words are withheld like a vital currency of survival. The mystery often starts with a response that is technically correct but emotionally empty, a fine that carries the weight of 1,000 grievances. You find yourself replaying the last few hours of your life, scanning for a hidden fault or a social debt you forgot to pay. The other person remains a closed book, offering a performance of normalcy while their eyes reveal a deep, simmering desire to be seen and felt. This gap between the yes of the mouth and the no of the soul creates a psychological fog that is intentionally designed to disorient. It is a form of communication that refuses to communicate, forcing the recipient to guess the rules of a game they never agreed to play. Why do we choose to strike from the shadows of our own silence, rather than speaking our truth with the clarity of directness? The human mind has developed a sophisticated repertoire of shadow tactics that allow us to express deep anger without ever having to take responsibility. Philosophers and observers of human nature have long noted that the most potent forms of power are often those that remain entirely invisible. Arthur Schopenhauer once suggested that human sociability is a way to stay warm without getting pricked by the spikes of our neighbors' personalities. Passive aggression is the art of pricking someone while pretending your spikes are tucked away, a delicate and dangerous dance of hidden, unacknowledged hostility. It is a hidden mechanism that allows the ego to remain blameless while the target of the behavior feels the sharp sting of rejection. Many of us move through life using these subtle punishments, rarely stopping to realize we are acting as both the judge and the executioner. By understanding this pattern, we peel back the layers of a mask that almost every human being has worn in moments of fear. The core of this behavior is a fundamental breakdown in the way the human mind processes the experience of a perceived or real injustice. When we feel wronged but fear the consequences of direct confrontation, the brain seeks an alternative route for its mounting internal pressure and rage. Sigmund Freud described this as a form of displacement, where the primary impulse is stifled only to leak out through more socially acceptable cracks. The ego demands satisfaction for its hurt, but the social self demands safety, leading to a compromise that manifests as a cold punishment. This mechanism is often rooted in a deep-seated insecurity, where the individual feels they lack the inherent power to be heard or respected. By withdrawing affection, cooperation, or even basic acknowledgement, they regain a sense of control over a situation where they previously felt entirely small. The mind convinces itself that it is taking the moral high road by staying quiet, while actually engaging in a prolonged emotional siege. It is a cognitive shortcut that avoids the terrifying vulnerability of stating a person's needs, choosing instead to make the other person suffer blindly. We see the ego protecting itself by framing the silence as a virtue, a stoic endurance of another person's supposed failures and slights. This internal narrative allows the passive-aggressive person to maintain an image of moral superiority, while causing significant and measurable psychological distress to others. The brain's reward system even provides a small, toxic hit of satisfaction when the target finally breaks and begs for some form of explanation. This power dynamic is a foundational element of the behavior, turning a meaningful relationship into a desperate game of cat and mouse and shadow. The insecurity that drives this is often so well hidden that the person themselves truly believes they are merely being a quiet or peaceful person. They use mental shortcuts to label the other person as the primary aggressor, justifying their own withdrawal as a necessary and righteous defensive measure. This perception is almost always distorted by a confirmation bias that looks for reasons to remain offended and safely distant from the other person. The mechanism is self-reinforcing, as the temporary relief of punishing the other person reduces the immediate internal tension of the unexpressed and heavy anger. Over time, this becomes the brain's preferred method of conflict resolution because it feels safer than the unpredictable risk of an open, honest dialogue. In the modern workplace, this often looks like the forgotten email or the deliberate, subtle exclusion of a colleague from a casual, necessary loop. It is the colleague who agrees to a project in the public meeting, but then sabotages the timeline through a series of unfortunate accidents. The digital age has provided new canvases for this art, such as the read receipt left without a response for several hours or days. In romantic relationships, it is the heavy, performative sigh followed by a claim of being just tired when asked if something is actually wrong. It is the person who cleans the kitchen with an aggressive, pointed loudness, making sure the noise communicates what their voice refuses to say. These modern examples show how we weaponize the mundane details of daily life to send messages of extreme dissatisfaction and deep, unhealed hurt. The social environment becomes a minefield where the rules are constantly shifting and the triggers are hidden beneath a thin surface of civility. We encounter this in the friend who offers compliments that carry a hidden sting, designed to undermine your confidence with surgical and quiet precision. In every case, the behavior serves to keep the other person off balance, forcing them to walk on eggshells to avoid another sudden, freezing chill. The workplace becomes a theater of the absurd where productivity is sacrificed on the altar of unexpressed grievances and petty, small-minded internal slights. Conversations become performances where the subtext is far more important than the actual words being exchanged between the two parties in the room. We see it in the way parents might use the silent treatment to mold a child's behavior without ever explaining the actual nature of the transgression. This teaches the next generation that love is a conditional resource that can be withdrawn at any moment without any warning or reason. The psychological pattern is thus passed down, becoming a multi-generational language of avoidance and hidden, simmering resentment and very quiet, long-lasting pain. Underneath these behaviors lies a layer of deep-seated patterns that reinforce the mind's reliance on these silent, stinging, and ultimately destructive psychological punishments. One of the most profound patterns is the illusion of moral clarity that the silent person feels during their self-imposed period of emotional withdrawal. They believe their silence is a form of dignity, failing to see it as a manipulative tool used to coerce a response from someone. Carl Jung spoke of the shadow, those parts of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge, which often drive our most destructive and hidden human behaviors. The passive-aggressive person has relegated their anger to the shadow, convinced that they are a peaceful person who simply never experiences any rage. Because they cannot own their rage, they cannot control it, and it finds expression through these accidents and cold, distant, and biting silences. This misunderstanding of their own emotional landscape creates a barrier to growth, as they never face the reality of their own internal hostility. They perceive their own power as non-existent, which is why they feel justified in using these weapons of the weak against those they fear. Robert Greene notes that indirectness is often a strategy of the courtier, a way to influence power without being seen as a direct threat. However, in personal relationships, this strategy becomes a toxic substitute for the intimacy that requires honest and vulnerable direct communication between two people. The mind also uses the silence to gather data, watching how the other person reacts to the sudden loss of an emotional connection. This testing of the other person's loyalty or patience is a hallmark of the passive-aggressive cycle, creating a psychological trap for the target. If the target gets angry, the passive-aggressive person can then point to that anger as the reason they were being quiet in the first place. This gaslighting effect makes the victim feel as though they are the one with the problem, further protecting the aggressor's fragile and hidden ego. The pattern is also reinforced by a fear of abandonment. If I don't tell you I'm mad, you can't leave me for being angry. Yet, the irony is that the very behavior used to prevent abandonment often becomes the catalyst that drives the other person away forever. We see a total lack of emotional regulation, where the individual is unable to sit with the discomfort of a difficult or messy conversation. They choose the slow poison of resentment over the sharp, quick pain of a direct and honest confrontation about their own difficult feelings. This strengthens the behavior over time because it creates a world where the person never has to truly hear a different or challenging perspective. They live in a fortress of their own silence, where their grievances are never challenged and their self-perception remains entirely unchallenged and intact. The brutal realization is that passive aggression is rarely about the other person. It is a desperate and failing defense of a fragile self. People are often not intentionally trying to be cruel or manipulative in a way that is calculated or consciously planned out for weeks. Instead, they are limited by their own inability to process high-intensity emotions like anger, shame, or the deep fear of being rejected. The human mind is a master of self-protection, and it will build elaborate structures to avoid the pain of looking at its flaws. When someone punishes you silently, they are often screaming internally, but they lack the vocabulary or the courage to be heard by you. They are trapped in a prison of their own making, where the only way to feel powerful is to make someone else feel small. This behavior persists because it works in the short term, providing a sense of control over an unpredictable and often scary social world. Marcus Aurelius reminded us that the best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury, yet we often fail this simple test. The mind protects its identity by convincing itself that the other person deserves the silence, making the punishment feel like a form of justice. We must realize that we are often dealing with someone who is emotionally paralyzed, unable to bridge the gap between feeling and speaking truth. Their silence is not a sign of strength, but a white flag of surrender to their own internal fears and deep emotional limitations. Once we see the behavior for what it truly is, the sting begins to lose its power over our own internal emotional state. Now, we must turn the lens toward ourselves and ask the difficult questions that lead to genuine personal growth and psychological maturity. Have you ever used silence as a way to make someone else feel guilty without having to explain why you were actually hurt? Every human mind is vulnerable to these patterns because we all experience the fear of being misunderstood or rejected by those we truly love. It is easy to see passive aggression in others, but it is far more painful to admit when we are the ones withdrawing energy. Ask yourself if you are holding on to a grievance like a hidden stone, waiting for the right moment to let it drop on someone. Introspection is the only way to break the cycle, requiring us to be brutally honest about our own motivations and our hidden fears. Are you choosing silence because you are peaceful, or because you are afraid of the vulnerability that comes with speaking your own truth? We must examine the moments when we were too busy to reply or too tired to engage, and see them for what they were. True power lies in the ability to state a need clearly, without the desire to punish the other person for not knowing it beforehand. By inviting this level of self-reflection, we begin to dismantle the hidden structures that keep us isolated from those who are around us. The antidote to this psychological trap is a radical commitment to curiosity, humility, and a deep sense of intellectual and emotional honesty. It involves recognizing that our perceptions are often flawed, and that the other person is not a mind reader who knows our deepest heart. When we feel the urge to withdraw, we must instead lean in, using our words to build a bridge rather than a cold wall. Emotional awareness allows us to catch the impulse before it becomes a behavior, giving us the space to choose a much healthier response. Recognizing our own limitations is the first step toward building relationships that are based on reality rather than on silent, hidden expectations. In the end, the quiet punishments we inflict on others only serve to deepen the silence within our own hearts and our minds. We are all navigating a complex internal world, and the greatest gift we can give is the clarity of our own honest truth. The study of human behavior is not just about observing others, but about finding the courage to be seen by them quite fully. Friedrich Nietzsche suggested that the individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe or by themselves. Perhaps the greatest victory is not in winning a silent war, but in having the strength to lay down our hidden psychological weapons. Please share your thoughts on these patterns in the comments, as understanding our shared humanity is a journey we take together. Would you like me to explore the origins of the savior complex, or perhaps the mechanics of emotional unavailability next?